What a gorgeous place to film. I mean, look at that fire, isn't it gorgeous? Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jessica and I am ThisKiwi. And today we're going to go through my June TBR. I can't really say TBR because most of June is going to be the Amazing Readathon and my focus is going to be on that. And the Amazing Readathon is hosted by Bree from Four Paws in a Book. And we won't know what any of the prompts are until they drop. Not even the co-host know. So it's essentially like a pile of possibilities, and you kind of saw them. You saw them on my bookshelf reorganization, those first two shelves. But then I've also got some library holds and some library like audios and stuff like that as well. So I've got those and I'm hoping that they'll fit within the general theme. However, books that I can talk to you about are the Bookemon prompts for Pride Month in June. So June is Pride Month. And there is a themed Bookemon for this. And these books I have locked in. So I'm just hoping that they fit into the Amazing Readathons somewhere so my TBR isn't so huge. So there's 6 prompts to get this Bookemon. And they are the brick, which is to read a book with queer resistance. And that could be like somebody standing up to others, or somebody standing up to a bully, or standing up for themselves, or it could be as far as featuring riots. I know there were some major queer community riots, I think back in the 80s. So it could feature that, riots, protests in order to support the queer community. There's the flag, which is to read a book with all the colours of a queer flag. So we are all aware of the rainbow flag, but with the different identities, there also are different flags. So there's heaps of different flags out there. And the book has to feature all the colours of one particular flag, and you can choose whichever one you want. The pronoun pin, which is to read a book with non-binary rep, or the main character doesn't go by he, him, or she, her. Violets, so this is to read a book of queer poetry, and I mean that's pretty self-explanatory. I'm really glad there were suggestions that were given because I don't read poetry, so that should be really interesting, and I wouldn't have known where to start if I didn't have these suggestions. Sorry, thank you to Meredith and Ren who is putting this on. Rainbow is to read a book with queer joy in it. So there's a lot out there about like the queer community where it gets shown in like either a negative light, or there's like people who are not understanding, and that is quite often talked about. But the idea of this is to read a book with like that celebrates the queer community, that celebrates the joy of being queer. The triangle is to read a book with a historical element. So there's a lot that happened in history to do with the queer community. It doesn't have to be a non-fiction. It can be about the history of the queer community, but as long as it has a historical element in some way, so it can be historical fiction. So the books that I have chosen for this are Loveless by Alice Oseman, And this follows Georgia, who has never been in love, never had a crush, never been kissed, anything like that. But she is obsessed with fan fiction romance, and she has hope to find that someday with someone. She begins uni with a group of her friends, and she starts to plan how to find this romance, and it all goes horribly awry. And then she discovers the terms asexual and aromantic, and begins wondering about her identity. This seems to be a story of love, identity, self-acceptance, and friendship. And so that was for Brick. So for Flag, I have chosen Ace by Angela Chen. And this is a non-fiction that explores the meaning of asexuality in a sexually obsessed world. And that in itself is so intriguing to me. It discusses sexual attraction, consent, and society within the scope of asexuality. It includes interviews, personal stories from the author, and criticisms of culture. And I think it should be a very interesting read. I know this is a zoologist favourite as well, so that can count towards the badge for that one, for Bookemon. So yes, I'm quite interested to get to that relatively early in June, I'm hoping so. So Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. This is a graphic novel that I have chosen for Pronoun Pin, and it also serves as a memoir. The author identifies as E.M. Ear and follows Ear journey of self-discovery, coming out and explaining what it is to be non-binary and asexual and how it means to them. Sounds very interesting. I've never heard of these particular pronouns before. I've heard of them, they pronouns, but this eliminates even that. It eliminates the he, the H, the she, the SH, and the they, the TH. And that's almost kind of mind-blowing to me. Like it almost completely takes all pronouns out of the situation. And so you're just left with the person. So that is interesting to me, but I'm also interested to know how it works with people being able to remember to use those correct pronouns, because I'd be the first to admit I would struggle with that. I admit now that I struggle with the they them pronouns, and I do have to stop myself sometimes and think. So yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm hoping that the author decides to talk a little bit about that. So my next book for Book of Poetry is Comfort Food by Ellen van Nerven. Excuse me. This poetry focuses on bridging the gap between the author's Indigenous and non-Indigenous heritages. And this is coming from Goodreads. Goodreads says, the texture and sensuality of the poem's imagery create a portal of a young woman's life and her exploration of the body and mind. I'm honestly not sure what to think of this one. It's going to be a new experience for me, both reading poetry and also reading from queer authors as well. For Queer Joy, which is Rainbow, I have chosen Reputation by Lex Croucher. And this is a Regency era rom-com for, quote, fans of Mean Girls and Jane Austen. Take what you will of that. It follows Georgiana, who has been abandoned by her parents, and so she's living in a new town with her aunt and her uncle. And she eventually meets Frances, who is like the wealthy and the popular girl. And so while Georgiana is falling for Frances, then she's introduced to a whole new world filled with debauchery. Sounds like it's going to be a good time, no brain cells required. I got this idea from Aoife from Pretty Purple Polka Dots in her video where she recommends historical fiction. I thought that sounded like a good time and just got it out at the library straight away for hopefully the Amazing Readathon somewhere. So that's that one. And then for the final one for the Bookemon Pride Month is The Triangle. And this one I chose A Marvelous Light by Freya Marsk. And this is a fantasy romance / historical fiction set in an alternate Edwardian England. Features manor houses, a murder mystery, something to do with hedges, magic, and obviously a queer romance. So when Robin accepts a governmental position, he thinks it's quite minor. But it turns out he is parliamentary liaison to a secret magical society, quote. It's there where he starts having visions of his predecessor who is missing. So he's determined to find answers as to what has happened. However, he must enlist in the help of Edwin, who is like a rival or enemy. Being a Franro, you can kind of guess that it won't stay like that forever. And so they go about discovering plots that could, quote, threaten every magician in the British Isles. I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of things happening there. My initial thought with this is that it doesn't really know where it's going, but we'll see. I'm hoping it'll be a really good one. Those are the Bookemon prompts that I can highlight and talk to you about for June. For the Kiwi book of the month, and I'm determined to read this month, and I will fit it into the Amazing Readathon. I will be reading Once Were Warriors by Alan Duff. Now, before I get into this, there are very heavy trigger warnings that I do encourage you to look up, including domestic violence, sexual assault, rape, and suicide. This is not a light book. It was made into a movie. It's not a light movie. It's heavy as. It follows Beth and her family, and she's struggling to keep them together. They live in a violent neighborhood. The family has experienced violence, and I think it's going to show quite a juxtaposition between Māori tradition and what happens when people leave those traditions behind into a new life. I feel like this is going to make me cry because the movie makes me cry. And I do just want to mention that if you have seen the movie or if you have read the book, it is not an absolute reflection of New Zealand's of families in New Zealand, but in some places it is still a reality. It is heavily stereotyped. So if you're going to read this, go into it knowing that it is heavily stereotyped. It's not the reality for everybody. So for the Amazing Readathons books that I would like to read include The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I've heard great things about this. I've also heard people are not such a fan of this. And I believe it follows a ex-Hollywood star or a Hollywood star, and there's one journalist that she's letting into her life and telling her stories about what has happened, and I'm assuming her 7 husbands. The other book that I got out, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't actually know why I got this out, but it looked really interesting, and that is the Underground Railroad. It's about a slave on a cotton plantation in Georgia, where this main character has worse treatment than most. She's an outcast, even among her fellow Africans. When Caesar, a slave, recently arrived from Virginia, tells her about the Underground Railroad, they take the perilous decision to escape to the north, embarking on a harrowing flight, state by state, seeking true freedom. I've heard of this, and I would have got it out because it rang a bell somewhere. It's not a host favorite, but I would have been just looking around. So the other one that I got out, which is a host favorite, is The Rachel Incident by Carolyn O'Donoghue. And this looks to be about a girl who falls in love with her college professor, and her and her best friend go about helping her to plan how to seduce him, and it evolves from there. Perfectly captures the intensity and high and lows of first love, and it's also very funny. Another book that I just found, it's amazing what you can find on Goodreads with the Listopia, is A Constellation of Vital Phenomena by Anthony Mara. And I'm using this for book with a 5-word title. And this seems to be about a girl who has hidden in the woods in Russia while her father is abducted. And so she flees with her neighbor, who is a failed physician, to a bombed out hospital where Sonia, the one remaining doctor, treats a steady stream of wounded rebels and refugees and mourns her missing sister. The other one that I really want to read, and it's going to make me cry because it's to do with animals. If you've seen the movie, I bawled. That is A Dog's Purpose by W. Bruce Cameron. And this is essentially a dog who lives many, many, many lives, and the story of those lives. So the dog dies and then he reincarnates, I guess, and he just goes on so many different lives, and eventually he finds this boy, Ethan, and they have amazing adventures. I think even at the end of that life, when he's reborn yet again, the dog, Bailey is the name, is just trying to find out his purpose and find out what he's here for, and all the adventures along the way. And it's going to be, I feel like it's going to be so sweet and just a really good palate cleanser. So I have 4 more audiobooks that I really want to get to. The first is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. And again, I've seen the movie to this. I don't really remember it very much, but I think it follows a girl who's just trying to read books. I don't want to read too much into this. It is so beloved by so many people. I want to be surprised. But I'm sure a lot of people already know what The Book Thief is. It is another host favorite. So I'll be getting that at some point in June. The next one, which again is a host favorite, is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. So this is a queer book, so that will get me extra points for that one. But it is about a woman who finally gets her wife back after a deep sea mission that went kaput. And she returns home, but it's like something has changed and something's gone wrong. And it looks like Leah is starting to pull away from Miri after what happened on the ocean floor. Again, I don't know a whole lot about that. It is a story of falling in love, loss, grief, and what life there is in the deep, deep sea. Very interesting. Now, the next one I got is The Tattooist of Auschwitz. And I really want to read this because I started watching the TV series on Neon, which is a streaming service that we've got here. And I'm really heavy as anything. It's hard to watch, but it's good to watch. And this follows a man who was ordered to work as one member of a Jewish family. So he volunteered and went, got sent to a concentration camp, being Auschwitz, probably one of the most famous concentration camps there was. And he goes through a real time for a long time. And then somebody approaches him about learning how to be a tattooist, because everyone gets tattooed on their arm what number they are, and they're identified by those numbers. And so it follows him, but it starts with him as an older man telling the story to a journalist, and it goes back and forward from there. Really, really, really good series. And he finds love in this concentration camp, which is really sweet and also really sad, because like you never know when you're going to lose them. You're probably going to lose them. But he tattoos this girl and they kind of fall for each other straight away. And so it's essentially about the endurance of both of those people. It tells the story of somebody who lived in Auschwitz and didn't get killed. So those are all the books that I have so far, as well as what is on my physical shelf. A lot of the last ones that I told you about are a pile of possibilities. I'm hoping to get to them. There's quite a few audiobooks in there, so that does help a lot. It is still a fair bit. It's a big TBR. I'm hoping to get through some of the shorter books relatively quickly, though in the start of the month I'm thinking like the graphic novel and the book of poetry, I'm assuming won't be too long to read, or I could save them up for the Amazing Readathons. I think it's called the Face Off weekend, where like I think you get extra bonuses or extra points for every book that you finish during those 48 hours. Let me know what books that you are excited for in June, and if you are participating in the Amazing Readathon, pop an emoji in the comments below and let me know what team you're on. If you're on team fantasy, give me a dragon. If you're on team romance, give me a heart. If you're on team spooky, give me a ghost. If you're on team sci-fi, give me like some alien thing or a spaceship. And then historical, general, literal. What emojis could you give me? Give me one of those dancing girls. That is it for today's video, or tonight's video. Until next time, bye bye.